when things took a turn for the worse. The NYPD has new insight on who may be connected to the murder of a woman whose body was found stuffed inside a duffel bag in her Manhattan apartment. Investigators are looking for a pair of squatters, a man and a woman, who they believe were staying in the apartment prior to the gruesome discovery. Police say 52-year-old Nadia Vittel was last seen walking into her apartment.
So far this week, I've talked about squatters. I've asked the question if vigilantism was coming back, if people were going to start showing up to people's homes to get the squatters out. And I've also talked about the possibility that maybe men, and especially young men, just need to be coached. Now, before we talk about this incident that occurred in New York City, there's a few things that I need to go ahead and kind of preview for this video. I'm not only going to be talking about the incident, but I'm going to go ahead and talk about one of the three things that I want to speak about in particular right now. Sometimes the media has a way, and even at the local level, because it used to be that the local level is where we would go to actually get real truth on a situation. This right here also includes media outlets that are in, I don't know, servicing blue areas, red areas, all that type of stuff there. Either way, though, the local news is normally the outlet that you would go to get actual legitimate news. But I also learned this when I went through the Law Enforcement Academy back in 2015, that oftentimes what the media reports about a situation, 90% of it is in fact crap. It's that line from the movie Training Day. A lot of cops even confirm that. And even though I'm not somebody who's extremely pro-police, I got to talk about that. Oh, by the way, that right there reminds me, it's actually 4 or 5 separate things in this video that I'm definitely going to be hitting on more so towards the end. But I want to go ahead and get this part right here out of the way. In the last video that I did, I talked, and of course I used the same clip twice to kind of get the point across. I talked about this group, this neighborhood in Connecticut, Hartford, where they are actually cleaning up their neighborhood. Like, they actually pick up the trash, they try to keep all the crime out of there. It's a suburb of Hartford, Connecticut. And of course, as you guys are seeing right now, one media outlet, NBC outlet, has labeled them vigilantes. The other one, of course, has not. To be a vigilante, that means that you have to actually go out and fight crime to a certain extent. These people aren't really doing that. They're just kind of protecting their neighborhood. So I just want to go ahead and get that out of the way before we get started, that this group was not vigilantes or anything like that. And of course, when you look at the headline, you may often get manipulated by it. Now, me personally, I already knew this, and I kind of explained this in the previous video that they weren't vigilantes. But of course, in the description box, when people come across it, of course, I'm going to put it in there. Hey, look, you know, the mainstream media told you these people are here were vigilantes, but in reality, they're not. They're just simply people protecting their neighborhood. The exact same way you've got property owners who do, in fact, protect their property. Now, when I opened this video, you guys obviously saw a clip from Fox, okay? Fox in New York, okay? This is the kind of preview, the situation that we're going to be talking about. But something else, too, needs to be explained. There's a difference between an acquisition and simply squatting on something that belongs to somebody else. I'll be explaining that over the course of this video, especially once we get done with this actual topic, because this story right here is pretty daggone harrowing. But before we get to that story, I want to show you another story that happened a while back in the state of Oklahoma involving this same exact issue, and see the differences of how this situation right here was handled versus the one that we're about to talk about.
Yes, it wasn't the alarm clock, but gunfire that made folks in a local neighborhood jump out of bed this morning. Gunfire immediately followed by the sound of sirens as police raced to the scene in southwest Oklahoma City. News 4's Bria Berry has the new information.
The owner of this home behind me had to deal with a squatter situation this morning, which caused quite a commotion in the southwest Oklahoma City neighborhood. Gunfire erupting in this area near 42nd and St. Clair is not surprising to people who live nearby.
There's nothing new for us.
But when neighbors saw their street flooded with police cars and crime scene tape, they knew something was wrong. Early Thursday morning, a man got a call saying someone was inside his property, located here on the corner.
He shows up at the house, and there was apparently a group of homeless or transients squatting up in the house.
That's when police say one of the transients was armed with what appeared to be a pistol. Turns out it was a BB gun. The property owner telling police the transient pointed it at him.
The homeowner also was armed with a gun and shot and injured the other person.
Neighbors fed up with the crime in this area.
Nobody told you to walk in my house. Nobody told you to break in my house. So you deserve what you deserve. Okay. Simple as that.
Bria Berry, Oklahoma's News 4.
All right, Bria, thank you. Now, police tell us the transient is expected to be okay. As for the property owner, it's still unclear whether he'll face any.
And no, he should not have any charges filed with him at all. Apparently, these squatters, they believe that God gifts them other people's homes. It's not the way things work. But don't worry, we'll talk more about that towards the end when we talk about acquisitions, because some people just think that a piece of land is there, I can just go in and just pop a squat right on it, live on it, and maybe along with somebody else. But they don't really care, because apparently God gave it to them. But we'll talk more about that towards the end of the video.
Details having just flown in from abroad, the 52-year-old victim, Nadia Vittel, stopped by her late mother's apartment here in Kips Bay. It's right here in my rear view. And she was getting it ready for a family friend to move in. Cops say, though, when she unexpectedly found those squatters inside, that's when things took a turn for the worse. The NYPD has new insight on who may be connected to the murder of a woman whose body was found stuffed inside a duffel bag in her Manhattan apartment. Investigators are looking for a pair of squatters, a man and a woman, who they believe were staying in the apartment prior to the gruesome discovery. Police say 52-year-old Nadia Vittel was last seen walking into her apartment building on East 31st Street in Kips Bay last Tuesday.
It came as a complete shock and surprise, I didn't even know.
Jean Pompey is
a 52-year-old lady who, by the way, was living in Spain, gets information that her mother has died. Obviously, you don't want to get this information. Obviously, you don't want to find out that a parent died. As a matter of fact, I got to go ahead and be real with you guys. I had family. My father died right around this time of the year, 7 years ago. Okay, so obviously you don't want to get that type of information. I don't mean to get personal or anything like that right here, but if you've had a loved one that's passed away, then yeah, I'm obviously going to try to do the best I can to empathize with you guys. Because I'm pretty sure that I've got members of my audience that did in fact experience this type of news before. It's not good. It hurts. It takes a while to get over it, and eventually you learn to accept it. You move forward. But still, though, at the same time, though, this woman found that her mother had died. Now, I want you to imagine this woman, this 52-year-old's son, finding out that his mother died roughly around the same time that his grandmother died. Now, I want you to think about that really quick before we go into this story, because that's the problem with squatters, especially squatters like this right now. I'm not saying every single squatter is like this, but I did detail in a previous video why it was that squatters are an example of the worst of humanity. They're people who, quite frankly, don't hold themselves accountable. They think that what belongs to you is theirs. That's just how these people operate, and then they try to make money off of it. Some of these people, by the way, do this as a part of a scheme. But like I said, there may be another video down the road. But I'm pretty sure you guys know where I'm going with this. It's got a lot of people wondering if something like, say, vigilantism is coming back. Of course, I've told this in a previous video that coaching needs to come back to coach young men. This also includes young women, too. But when you hear a story like this right here, it makes you wonder exactly how bad things really and truly are and how much worse things are going to get going forward, especially in these very, very big blue cities. So here's the story. The lady goes home to settle her mother's affairs. Well, she goes to her mother's apartment to settle her affairs. She walks in. There are two squatters in there, a 19-year-old and an 18-year-old. By the way, kind of harkening back to the beginning of the video where I talked about the media manipulating. When the media originally reported this story, it was an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old. Now we have actual full verification that it's actually an 18-year-old and a 19-year-old. The names, of course, I'm not going to give you because I don't think these people deserve, but I'll leave the article in the description box of the New York Post because they had to go out and correct it and everything. The lady shows up. She goes inside her mother's apartment. These two squatters are there. They grab the woman, pick her up, throw her against the wall, and beat her to death. Then they stuff her body in a duffel bag, and then after they do that, they leave, they get to a car, they drive across the George Washington Bridge, they go through New Jersey, and then they end up in York, Pennsylvania, as you guys will see here in a second. And after they end up in York, Pennsylvania, they spend a bunch of money. They eventually get arrested on the charges, which, by the way, I forgot to mention, they destroyed that woman's car, tossed it off the bridge. Once they got over it, they just destroyed it, which you guys will see in a second. Pretty sure I got some of that wrong, but you'll see it in a second. Not only do they do that right there, they also spend a bunch of money. Now, how they caught these people is absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely amazing how they did this. But still, at the same time, though, you guys can obviously see it's people who obviously grew up with no one holding them accountable. They can just do whatever they like, and they understand that nobody's going to arrest them. Well, thank God the state of Pennsylvania is saying, no, we're not going to release you back to New York City, which we'll talk about in this video as well. But let's go ahead and watch some more of the story.
in the elevator and going up to her apartment on the 19th floor. A friend called to make a wellness check, but there was no answer.
So I went up, knocked on the door. It was just only the dog barking.
Shortly afterwards, the victim's son and two in-laws arrived to Vittel's apartment. When police got there, Vittel's lifeless body was found in the closet, stashed inside a duffel bag. Investigators claim she was beaten to death.
When I came into work, there was an ambulance here and one cop car.
Police allege the squatters had been staying in Vitel's apartment for days, and when she returned, the pair killed her and took off in her SUV. Security cameras captured the suspects coming in on Sunday and leaving Tuesday afternoon, the same day Vitel was last seen. It's believed that they drove her car across the George Washington Bridge into New Jersey and then into Pennsylvania, where they crashed the vehicle.
It's scary when something like this happens. You always expect it to happen somewhere else and not in your
own. Run a little bit longer. Fox out of New York, they're pretty good when it comes to copyright. Same thing with CBS. WGN is probably the worst when it comes to copyright claims on YouTube as far as news is concerned. News Nation is not that bad, which is funny too because it's actually owned by WGN. But here's the thing that needs to be stated. So these people kill this woman, and of course, her son would eventually show back up. We'll get to him in a second because obviously there's another news report because one was released 3 days later detailing more and more of the situation. But I want to go ahead and say this really quick about the 52-year-old woman, the victim in this case, the woman that was killed. Not the mother, which of course is still pretty daggone bad. The mother had died. Squatters came in after the mother had died. Somehow or another, they got past the bellman, and I've had friends of mine who live in the area tell me that it's almost impossible to get beyond the bellman, to get beyond the person who works these apartments. I'm still trying to figure out how that actually happened. I'm pretty sure some more information will, in fact, come out. You heard the girl at the very, very end. I show up to work. Next thing you know, I see ambulances outside. I have no idea what's going on. That right there is actually baffling me at this moment in time. I really truly don't have an answer for that. And of course, if you thought I was going to, and maybe if I alluded to the guys I was going to, my bad. I apologize for that. But still, at the same time, though, these people should not be inside this apartment complex. They should not be inside this lady's apartment. It's not their property. Girl goes up to simply settle her, get her some other stuff squared away, eventually settle affairs. Next thing you know, she's dead. Beaten to death, body stuffed inside of a duffel bag, and the car eventually stolen, and eventually also not only stolen, but then they also tossed the car, turn right back around, and eventually get caught in Pennsylvania. Now, we'll get to the Pennsylvania section in a minute. I hadn't talked about that yet. But you guys can obviously see exactly what's going on here. People think this property belongs to them. They take the property. They realize they could get arrested, which, well, not really. But I guess the situation is that they know that law enforcement probably won't arrest them. It's possible that these two, being so young, didn't know the law. Maybe they thought that, I don't know, maybe like law enforcement would lock them up, when we've seen in previous cases where law enforcement actually sides with the squatter over the person who actually owns the property, which, of course, is a pretty jacked up law. I talked about that in a previous video. The point is this right here. This is a 19-year-old and an 18-year-old who thought they could do this crap, and they try to get away. They shouldn't have done it. But still, at the same time, the law does, in fact, protect them, which, of course, is going to segue into another part later on in this video. But let's get back to the actual...
Police say 2 alleged squatters killed a mother and hid her body in a duffel bag in an apartment.
CBS 2's Allie Bauman reports those suspects are now on the run and may be in Pennsylvania.
It was like this.
This is the apartment closet where 52-year-old Nadia Vitel's body was found last week, stuffed in a duffel bag while her dog barked in the living room.
I've always believed that no one had moved in.
Jean Pompey is the superintendent here at 206 East 31st Street. He went looking for Vitel's with her son, who at the time feared her missing.
They had called me and told me they haven't heard from her.
Police sources tell us investigators have identified 2 people who may have been squatting in that apartment and who they believe beat Vitel's to death before stealing her car from the street and fleeing to Pennsylvania, where they later got into a car accident.
I showed you guys a different report from a different news outlet for a reason. You see, the Fox News outlet didn't cover something that I thought would be very, very important a little bit later on in the video. Apparently, the girl who was killed, she had already been let's just say she had already been on the camera once before. She doesn't work for the news agency or anything like that, but obviously people out there saw her at some point in time. More than likely on television, as you're about to see now.
Spoke to Vitel's back in 2021 as she helped her son Michael get his business off the ground from her Long Island garage.
I kind of gave in into this. The original thought was no way.
Monday, Michael eulogized his mother at her funeral.
As much as I rarely admitted it, because it hurt me in my stomach, I knew she was always right. She was always reliable, and she was always there.
Sources tell us that investigators believe Vitel's may have been moving herself or someone else into this Kips Bay apartment in the building where her late mother lived. They do not believe Vitel's knew the squatters, who were told came in while she was tidying the apartment.
Unfortunately, there are so many horrible cases because you create serious confrontation. Because just imagine you enter your own home to find people there.
State Assemblyman Jake Blumenkrantz sponsors a bill to weaken some of the so-called squatters' rights in New York. Currently, squatters may be legally considered tenants after 30 days in a unit.
There is virtually no recourse for when someone is gaming the system here. So all this does is remove the loophole and remove those who are trying to...
Really quick, I'm going to take a second and be extremely critical of the media, okay? Very critical of the media. If that woman had not been on television before, if she had not been interviewed, do you think it's possible that maybe this case right here would not get any notoriety at all? I just want you to sit there and think about it just for a quick second. The reason why is this here. You see, in New York, you've got roughly 8 million people living there. You got 5 boroughs, you got Staten Island, Manhattan, you've got Queens, you've got Brooklyn, you've got the Bronx. A lot of people living there. So the news cycle in New York is obviously pretty pretty busy, pretty hectic. As a matter of fact, if you look up New York City news, you typically tend to get CBS, ABC, NBC, Fox, of course, and sometimes you'll even get the New York Daily News. It's just if you go to YouTube and just look up New York City. Same thing with Chicago, too. The point is this right here. I don't think that this case would have been elevated the way it was if this lady had not been on television before. And something else, too, if you are a young son like she has, you're obviously heartbroken and devastated. Prayers go out to him because he lost his mother, and like not even a month prior to that, he also lost his grandmother. It's been a pretty daggone bad month for him, is all I'm saying. And, of course, identification in these big cities of bodies, identification of people as a whole after they have died is something that could take a very, very long time. So you have to give kudos to the New York Police Department for being able to pull this off. But still at the same time, getting back to the point of squatters. The thing is this right here. You've seen people talk about this, the very, very bad cases that the attorney did in fact mention. But of course, you do have people out there who have tried to put forward legislation about this. But of course, the state of New York, the city too, just watch.
Republican State Assemblyman Jake Blumenkrantz has filed a bill that would make it easier for homeowners to remove squatters from their properties. Under New York state law, people who claim they're tenants can't be arrested for trespassing. That also means homeowners can't change the locks, get rid of their stuff, or shut off the electricity. The bill would allow police to intervene and make arrests instead of forcing homeowners into an arduous court process.
It's so heavily Democrat and so beholden to their base that they won't even enact the slightest bit of common sense. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that you have squatter laws that protect the squatter, okay? Well, shouldn't the homeowner have the right to remove the squatter? Look, let me say this really quick. I'm a very, very pro-Second Amendment person. I'm not advocating. Obviously, I can't do that. If I advocated for something, then that probably would get removed from YouTube. But I want to say this really quick before I go any further. Because these people, these two right here, by the way, they would eventually be found, okay? I just want you to know they would eventually be found. They would get arrested. We'll talk more about it on the other side. But the thing that I want to say really quick is this here. We'll take red flag laws, for example. I'm very, very much against red flag laws for a multitude of reasons. As a matter of fact, I'm not in favor of gun laws beyond the initial background check you get when you fill out the FFL form, because many people, contrary to popular belief, don't seem to notice that when you actually go buy a gun, you got to fill out a form, and that form goes to NICS, which is a division of the ATF, and they do a background check, and they're the ones who determine whether you get to leave with that weapon or not. Most people think that background checks don't occur. So when you hear somebody say universal background checks, they're actually gaslighting you because universal background checks already exist. Red flag laws are bad because of the way they can be used. Now, let me explain this really quick. Let's just say that you create a red flag law that says I can get into my neighbor about a conversation. I'm a Trump voter. Maybe he's a lib or whatever. He disagrees with me, so he calls the cops, says I'm dangerous. Okay. That's how bad a red flag law can be. However, if you're going to sign that, there needs to be a provision that states that the person who's being accused has the opportunity to fight back. All right, and it shouldn't cost him a dime either. Just saying that's the way it should be. I mean, if you're gonna, you can't just sign rules for thee, not for me. That's sort of thing there. I personally think if you're going to allow the squatter to be able to live in a piece of property that's not theirs, I think the homeowner should, quite frankly, be allowed to deal with that in the way that they, quite frankly, want to do. I can't go into detail because of U-Term Terms of Services. But getting back to the story at hand. So what would eventually happen to said squatters?
Started in New York City, moving to Lower Paxton Township where the crash happened, and it ended this morning in York County. Hallie Jacobs has been following this story for us, and she has the very latest.
We're at the spot on Jonestown Road where the suspects were found after a police car saw them crash their car. Now, for some perspective, they were traveling in a Lexus on the westbound lane when they were trying to make a right-hand turn, crashing into a Chevy Tahoe. According to court documents obtained by CBS 21, initially the driver of the Lexus involved in the crash gave a fake name and said she was a resident of York County. It was later revealed that the vehicle belonged to the victim, 52-year-old Nadia Vitels. The two suspects in the car, 19-year-old Haley Tejada and 18-year-old Kensley Alston, were then arrested this morning in York by U.S. Marshals. They have not been charged in connection with Nadia's murder. Police have only named them persons of interest.
She was so excited.
They were caught. They were listed as persons of interest. Well, what if I was to tell you at this moment in time that these people are being held right now in Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania does not want to let them go back to New York? Probably because District Attorney Alvin Bragg came out recently and basically still sided with the squatters over the issue. Liberal logic, people. Liberal logic. They're openly calling for the crimes and stuff to continue. They do not have your best interest in mind if you live in these areas. Okay, they don't care about you. They never have. They care more about the criminals. It's who these people are. It's the lens they look at everything from. It's through that whole, well, the squatter is oppressed. No. The squatter is just a good old-fashioned POS who needs to be, can't really say it, but still. And to go on top of this, there's other cases. Like, for example, there was a lady that was killed in the Roosevelt Hotel. The killer ended up in Arizona. I did a video on this earlier, too. Arizona is not letting that guy go because they know if he goes back to New York City, he's just going to be let go of by Alvin Bragg. The killer of Lake and Riley, that guy there was an immigrant in New York City. Him, his wife, and his brother. He had been locked up on a previous charge, and then to go on top of that, he had to be let go because there wasn't enough room in the jail. He ends up in Georgia. Next thing you know, a nursing school student dies. The people who jumped the officers in Times Square, two of them boys ended up in Arizona, found out that they were a part of a gang in Venezuela. Arizona didn't want to let them go. The point is this right here. If you find any criminals from an area like, say, New York City or a city like New York, and same thing with Chicago, too, because they're just as bad, chances are you're going to have to hold on to them to keep them from becoming a menace to the rest of the country and somewhere else. I mean, I would hate to think that you let somebody go and then they turn right back around and they kill somebody else in another state. I mean, it's pretty embarrassing that another state has got to tell the city of which these criminals originally came from that you suck at your job. This right here is what lack of accountability creates. It creates lack of standards, and it creates the, I can do whatever the hell I want and not be judged. Alvin Bragg deserves, can't say it. Just letting you know, can't say it. YouTube's probably already demonetized this video by the time I released it anyways. I have no other words to say. Sorry, I'm going off the cuff here. But that right there brings me to this final point, because I think this right here sums up the entire situation nice and, I'd say, nice and tightly. When I was in the Marine Corps, November 2003 to November 2007, it was when I was in boot camp. We had a drill instructor. It was the third hat, because my platoon, typically in a Marine Corps platoon or boot camp platoon, you have 4 to 5 drill instructors. My platoon was a special case. We only had 3. We didn't have as many recruits. And then to go on top of that there, one of the other hats had gotten removed because one of the other drill instructors got removed due to family issues. Not going to say any names or anything like that. I don't give away that type of stuff. It's a security matter. And we were doing rifle range. Nice little moment every now and again where drill instructors are kind of allowed to, kind of remove the campaign cover and just kind of be real with you. Same thing. If you ever served in the Marines, then you might have heard the term school circle front quarterdeck, or if you've ever did the Crucible at Parris Island, then you probably know what I'm talking about. The drill instructors are allowed to be a little bit more lax instead of being up your rear all the time. Well, they explained to us exactly what the difference was between an acquisition and property owners. And of course, this is kind of the way I've always kind of felt that this was the way it was. If the property doesn't belong to anybody at all and you just simply grab said property or you use it, we kind of refer to that as an acquisition. It doesn't belong to anybody, so therefore it's called an acquisition. Now, granted, here in the civilian world, obviously things are much, much different. If you grab something that may or may not, that even if it doesn't belong to someone else, it's not an actual owner right there, later on the real owner can come back and reclaim it, and guess what? You got to give it back, all right? So obviously the military world and acquisition is completely different than what the hell is going on here. Now, these people, more than likely squatters, have no idea what the hell I just said, okay? They have probably no clue at all. These right here are people who are just straight up taking property just to be freaking taking property because they're leeches, they're mooches. They're the lowest form of society. They're using the law in their favor to gain some form of favor. And as I explained in a previous video, the first guy, the first real squatting incident that got reported, which is not the only one, pretty sure it was not the real true first one, but the first one that I reported on, the guy in that case was taking the home that, by the way, the family had paid for so that way they could put their son who had Down syndrome in there to be closer to other family. He was renting that home out. He was posting the rooms all over Zillow. He was trying to rent it out to his friends, try to get some extra money. Meanwhile, running the air conditioning, the water, and all that stuff to a tune of a bill of $2,500. Which, by the way, the people who bought the house were forced to pay for because the lights and water were in their name. These people are scumbags, is who the hell they are. Now, I brought up acquisition for a reason. You see, that's a different term that's used for a different era. And these people are basically applying that or trying to apply it, then use the laws against them. Look, I'm very, very much still, and it's never going to leave me. Once a Marine, always a Marine. And, of course, I'm going to think of acquisition as acquisition. But this right here is not acquisition. This right here is just outright blatant robbery. These right here are people who bought and paid for this home. In the case of the lady we just talked about, she just simply went up there to get her mother's stuff, to put it away, to kind of inventory it for keepsake, family heirlooms and stuff, which I didn't say earlier. And she got killed for all of her trouble for her attempts of doing this. Does any of this make any sense to you? Does any of this right to you? New York City used to be a great place, and now it's about as ass backwards as you can get. Up is down, black is white. I really, truly have no idea what to say. I mean, for a while there, I wanted to change the name of the channel to disassociative indifference, because that right there is what we've got. We've got heavy amounts of indifference right now in our society. And of course, it's led to these people who think that accountability is just this really, really bad word. And of course, it's being enforced by the politicians. That right there is what you're getting if you're living in a blue state. And oh, by the way, if you live there, you did in fact vote for it. I'm just saying, just figure I'd throw it out there. It's wrong. It's bad. It's obviously something that someone like myself can come up here online and bitch and complain and bellyache off and get views. I'm not going anywhere. I can't work an actual full job. So I've got all the time in the world to do content creation. Still, at the same time, though, you should do a lot better if you live in these areas and you unwittingly voted for this type of crap. You got a 52-year-old woman who's dead. Her son is now looking at the fact that his mother and his grandmother have both been dead in the past month and a half. You got another situation where somebody actually bought said home for somebody who needs said home, who's got a mental disability. By the way, the left is all about the disability thing. You got to be empathetic to those who got disabilities, but yet you just screwed one over. And of course, you've also got the other guy who took the woman's house that, by frankly, was willed to her. That was her home. Her mom and daddy made sure that was her house. You'll see it in the previous videos. And now you got this situation here. Squatting issue. Squatters are the worst types of human beings. I'm just going to leave it at that right there. Guys, please tell me what you think in the comment section. Please hit the like button, subscribe. Please share the video, sign off in the comment section, and I'll see you guys later.